Fluent, those kind of things. So I just laughed it off, and then left right. But then when you raise it now, that's when I actually try to connect the dots. So from your own experiences in terms of this question of accent, what are the layers? Are there any layers, and then how is it also interested? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take two more from over there on that side, and then I'm going to let the other panelists come in. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Khoza-Shangase. First, I'd like to say, and really, this is awesome. And it's amazing how, when black people tell their stories, when they finally come out and tell the stories, you find yourself within those stories yourself. And I just want to say that I so wish there could be many more of you, because those experiences are so important in developing the understanding of the youth and this generation about race and racism issues. Because the complexity of racism today is that it is so individualized. And then we fail to come together and share these experiences so that we become a bomb. I mean a ball that will deal with this in the way in which it was dealt with in the past. You know, this thing of being individualized and being boxed by whiteness in your corner, and it creates a doubt in your mind whether are you oversensitive because there are so many things that are thrown at you, or are you just exaggerating things, you lying? There's no such a thing happening in South Africa today. So I want to say the collectiveness and the collective voice that you have brought today in this world. Using my Christian language, I'll say I pray that there will be many more, and this will be the seed that we keep going and we make this world understand the stories that some of us will die with, and they are in the stories that you have told.
Mandela.
We'll take one at the back, and then we will let him give a response, and then we'll come for the next round. So the person at the back, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate you. You know, if I was young, I could say I'm motivated, because I could have listened to you as what we call motivational speaking. You're not doing that. But the message, that's how I received the message. Yeah. It reminds me, in the late 80s, we had a friend, an African-American scholar, who was here. He was collecting stories about this kind of experience that you went through. And one day, I remember sitting with Salim Valley and she was telling us that. And our response was this: oh, what do you want to do with them? We know all those stories. Everybody knows. What we really want to understand is the meaning of those stories. And what you've done was actually to be able to integrate some theory into that and generate some theory which adds to our understanding of those stories. And I think that you've done a great job. It's something that should be replicated at all levels. Thank you.
I'm going to pass over to the panel.
Okay, I'll start. Okay. So on the question about the shift in the fact that I'm now sitting on two bumps, I think I went through a process of really engaging with what is exactly it is that happening to me or has kept me in a corner and made me feel that I don't belong. And I really worked on my own internalized oppression. I engaged and I read Biko, I read all the decolonial scholars' work, and really I also connected with the stories that my father used to tell me about the experience of working in different spaces in apartheid South Africa. And I realized that, and the message from my father was very clear, that stand up for yourself and stand up for others. And I felt if I continue to walk into the space as a minority and operate on the principle of like, I must be grateful that you allowed me to be in the room, so I'm grateful, I'm not going to change, that I'm actually betraying people who suffered, And I realized that I had to stand up and speak up for myself. So, and I also began to say to myself, when I was a student at Wits in the 90s, Wits was a comfortable space for white people. It is going to be a comfortable space for me. So I engaged around the idea of being at work and experiencing that space as a home for me. And that I will go into meetings and I'll stand as one. I'll come as one, but I'll stand as 10,000. I will feel that I have a contribution and a very significant contribution to make, and I will call a thing a thing. So if I'm experiencing you as coming across like this in a meeting, I'm going to tell you, And so also at the moment, this book has allowed me to be invited to different spaces at Wits to talk about how we can decolonize the way we assess, decolonize our education, and I am becoming that voice. So that shift, really, I had to do some inside job, and unpack and say, what is happening? Why am I feeling like this? Why when I'm in this space, I feel that I have to keep quiet and not say something. So it was basically what the work that happened inside. Do I feel supported by men of color? In my experience, I'm supported by women of color. I don't have in my workspace men of color. In most cases, I'm supported by women. And I'll stop there.
Wait, just don't move, just squish there. I'm too tired to get up. We all, if you read all our stories, even though we haven't titled them Sitting on One Bum, but we actually, all of us, have that thread in our stories. And how we have managed to stay, because people say, you've gone through so much, how are you still here? For me, it has been finding safe spaces. And these kinds of engagements, for me, are one of those. Finding safe spaces where you can be free to be. You can be free to be. And you don't have to wear a different mask. You can just be. That for me is very important. So I found that just this project created safe spaces for me where people affirm, validate, share. That's important. But it's also important, what was very important for me also was to focus and know exactly what my purpose was in the academy. There was a time when I wanted out and I had to go for counseling. Oh, I also forgot that some of us have to be on medication. I had to take antidepressants. And I share that in the chapter. But to focus, I had to find out there is no way somebody's going to drive me out of this space because I thrive in knowledge production. I love research. I love supervising research. I will not let you throw me out. And I will not allow you to silence my voice. Because by you frustrating me out of the system, you are frustrating that voice. You're kicking that voice out. So I had to really focus and ignore the rest, sort of let it bump off. Have I been supported by men of color? A resounding no. During the writing of the book, I'll give you a very clear example. During the process of doing the dialogues and putting the book together, a majority of the people that were in leadership positions at universities in the country were black men. And the majority of the contributors in the book are black women that were going through hell under black men. So there's no question for me about whether they're supporting me or not. They're not. About the accent, I always believe this, that the more it is like the clearer and the more polished you sound, like I'm doing now, brings you closer to whiteness. So I have the opposite. I have the same jolt that Edith goes through, because when I speak, I'm then expected to act in a certain way, and then I unleash the angry black woman. And there is no marrying the two. There is no. Then I get the question, where are you from? So it's whichever one you take. We have accent issues, but the accent issue has to do with closeness to whiteness. If you can speak like me, then you most likely think like me, and so you and I are Okay, then there was a very interesting question about performance and how does performance play a role in us reclaiming the spaces. It's not even about performance, because performance for black people is measured completely differently. Completely different. You work your butt off. You publish 8 times your white colleague, and every time you're assessed, you're told, this is my worst phrase, but I know this now, you are on the cusp. Right? You are almost, like, how bloody hell? You're on the cusp. I had to go and look this up. I had to go and look it up, because I was like, what is this cusp? What is this cusp I'm on? Right? So performance has nothing to do with anything. I hope that answers your question. Okay, I'll stop here for a minute.
Go back, so that I can do.
Oh, back.
Yes. It really shows that we are lazy, eh? Okay, I wouldn't really, I think I agree with what Katja is saying, and especially on the issue of performance. And also with black men, I think we have a problem, a very serious problem. Especially within racialized societies. Because you see, black men are less threatening. The problem is the black woman. Because somehow black men are less threatening. You have to deal with patriarchy, race will come. But I guess we as black women, we are completely at the bottom rank of human ontology, and therefore this is where we belong. We are actually not really, and because these racialized spaces and the universities are very competitive spaces, and as black women beginning to enter these spaces, there's also a threat that we are being. I mean, in South Africa we have these equity policies for those who are not from South Africa, and therefore we have become the new enemy as well, because there is a position for VC, and black women are being appointed, and people have been working for 40 years to become VC. Suddenly there's a new enemy now. Performance was going to take me there, but now equity policies say we want to see women on the top. So as much as our black men may want to share the experiences with, they do share many experiences with us. Many of the experiences that we experience, but then we have created a new problem with equity policies as well, that we are competing against each other. And I think that's what I would say around this issue. The second question, or John, you asked around accent. Wow, I'm going to read a small paragraph from my chapter. It's on page 174. In the classroom, our being is not only questioned and undermined by whites, but also by some of the students we teach in these historically white institutions. UJ caters for diverse groups of students from all social backgrounds, which includes black students. We have never had black authority at educational institutions. Many of our young people in these historically white institutions come from this middle class black background, and they have never seen, from grade 1, they have never seen a black woman in front of them. They come to first year and they see you. Who's this one now? And they begin to ask themselves, what is she going to tell me? So what happened in this class? On one occasion in my classroom, I encountered an issue of accent again, albeit here in South Africa. And in one of my undergraduate classes, I pronounced an English word in my Sotho accent. Poor me. And the students burst into laughter. But instead of feeling embarrassed, John, or offended, I was disappointed. And I took the opportunity. The class stopped whatever I was teaching to teach a few lessons on how mentally colonized they were. And I was doing this because I was sharing the class with my German colleague. That thing. I know who was doing this in the same class, but there was no problem. And I say in the chapter, I helped my students realize that it was not about my pronunciation, in fact, because it was obvious that I'm not a first language English speaker. It was more about who is speaking. A challenge on my being, also on my positionality in the hierarchy of the university. So because it didn't happen to my European-born colleagues with different accents. Even my Afrikaans colleagues with different accents. It doesn't happen to them. And that incident opened an opportunity for learning through dialogue with my students. And some of them began to confess. They started telling me, wow, ma'am, and it's true. No one laughs when Dr. Malan speaks in Afrikaans accent. Some of them, these lecturers, they even mutilate some of these English words, but no one laughs. And they were so blown away with my pedagogy. Although when they first saw me, or they told me how they were blown with my pedagogy, although when they first saw me, they thought, what does she know? What can she teach? And it was clear that these poor students were, what's this now? In their naivety, to be is to be like, and to be like is to be like the oppressor. And in comparison to the core beings at this university, I was that non-being who was even struggling to pronounce words. And for this reason, I think we need more black academics at our institutions of higher learning, so that these odd accents, this domestic worker accent, can become part of the mainstream at our universities. The accent, the diversity cannot just come in our skins. It will come also with accents and many other things, food. There's many things, dress code. So if we speak in diversity, we are not just speaking about skin colors. We are speaking about many things, including these accents that we speak about. I wanted to address the question on individualization of race, which I agree with you. And I think what enables it is this spirit of exceptionalism. There are blacks, some of us, who we have turned them. And I think we are the ones who also do it. They are not just created by the system, we also do it. You know, I was listening to a paper, I was in China last week, from one guy in Sierra Leone, and he actually put it, and I said, okay, this thing does not happen in South Africa only, this is an African problem then. It happens in Sierra Leone, where he was telling that when someone is a president or a vice chancellor or a dean, there is this thing of saying, after you, na you. And I said, what? The phenomenon of after you, na you, it means there is a dean or there's a vice chancellor, and there is another one before anybody can come, whoever is the deputy. So after you become the president, and before the deputy president is you. So, and then he was arguing that when people are doing wrong, we always say, we praise them. Chief, we call each other chief. For people who are stealing, thieves, actually. I don't know why the chief is becoming the Instead of saying thieves, we are saying chiefs. So all of this. So I guess we also create this individualism, and I think the spirit of exceptionalism, we need to be careful. It's good. I mean, we should celebrate black excellency, but we should be careful. The minute you begin to see yourself as being singled out as a model for other blacks, you need to worry where your credibility comes from your community.
Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, I think that we're going to go to a last round now, because I know that the winter school colleagues have had a long day. They still need to have something to eat. Yes. So we're going to take this last round, and I'm going to ask the panelists to please take notes. I see in the middle here, and we'll go to the back, and we'll come to the front and over here. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much, Edith, Katja, for your presentation.
Can you please use the mic?
Oh yeah. It's quite affirming, and also one of my biggest fears is that 10 years from now on, we'll still have a bunch of black women writing about the same thing under the black leadership. That is my biggest fear currently. Magwanda wrote in 1990, Hear Our Voices. You are writing in 2019, Black Academic Voices. In 10 years' time, it means we are more likely to have a similar kind of debate. It's worrying, it's disturbing. But I wanted you to speak to how whiteness, in a way, reinvents itself currently. Prof. Siepe recently said these universities, they tend to choose their blacks very well. The palatable blacks, they tend to occupy the space. And the kind of censorship that comes being a not so palatable kind of black. I want you to speak on that and how whiteness, in a way, is trying to, mold and reinvent itself through these palatable blacks that we see in many ways. But also my question is that, what is the transformation project of historically black universities? Because we tend to dwell on the white universities when we talk about transformation. What is it that University of Venda must do? What is the University of Limpopo must do to be able to be decolonized? Thank you so much.
Okay. I'm moving from that side to the side, and there was something that I had missed out earlier over here. You still want to? No, I think you okay? Then we'll go to the back.
Good evening. I would like to take this to the students' perspective now. I feel like these dialogues are very important in our lifetime or even in our spaces. Because I feel like if we avoid such dialogues, will continue being in these colonized spaces in our institutions. These things are as small as being taught certain contents in westernized format, even whereby it is we as black people are not relating to what is being taught in a lecture. This proceeds to having come from a black school, coming to this university, and you find out that every lecturer is white. You can't even express yourself because you're even afraid of this face that is in front of you. You can't express yourself. You can't really say what you want to say. That you would have said to someone who looks like your father, or even the people that you surrounded yourself with. You understand? Now, such things matter. Now I wanted to know, how do you try to maintain a spirit of determination, commitment, and hope in a system that was created to be against black progress? Secondly, how do you keep reminding yourself that being black is not a sin? But being black does not mean that you're small and confined in stereotyped thinking that you are small or you are inferior than the other. I think that was my issue.
Thank you for that. I'm going to come. Can you please put off the mic? I'm coming to the front here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It was a journey, actually. I hunted you. But with that said, I've just been in a journey of a PhD. And part of my PhD was actually doing research on workplace bullying in higher education. My focus was women academics. And I could relate with each and every chapter that is written here. And I can actually also position myself as a former academic. My experiences, not just as an academic, but my experiences as an HOD. But also, what I find very, very sad in this space of higher education is that as a black academic, you're not only fighting your fights, you're also fighting the fights of the students. Because certain people decide to decide. But there's an important issue that caught my attention. Your journey doing a PhD, Prof. You quote, there's a section where you said, PhD for some of us who come from a marginal community, it's a soul-searching spiritual wrestle. We're talking about transformation. And one of the key things that we're talking about, we say we want to have black women in leadership. And the reality is that black women do not have PhDs. And the reality that these same people who are supposed to supervise us, they're not even in relation to the things that we want to research. So what do we do as black academics? And some of the people will say, oh, it's taking you 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. But no one is actually listening about your frustration in the journey. I must honestly say, black academics, there is this thing, in fact, I normally say, black, in the word black, there is the word lack.
Yeah.
There is always this mentality that black people are lacking. And as a black people, you cannot rightfully claim your space before you have a PhD, because you play a role of both being a student and being an academic. And the same racist is supposed to be a supervisor, or it's supposed to be the same person who is in the committee that is supposed to evaluate whether your proposal is okay or not.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, congratulations again. I mean, it took a while for me to get the book. I had a simple question. As you know, my work is critical masculinity studies. And I mean, it's the journey of cleansing my mind about all the kinds of advantages that I have as a black man. And this is quite important, that you just with Katja and Charlie and Edith. I know what would happen if black women were to withdraw their love, their care, their work, their thinking from the world. I'm quite aware more about the kinds of unpaid work that they do. unpaid labor, emotional labor. And that the whole economy is founded on minimum